Hey, what's up, everybody? I want to welcome all of our campuses, those of you that might be joining us online as well. My name is Mike, and I get to be on the teaching team at this incredible place, and just so grateful for you, and so grateful to be with you this weekend. Man, I hope you're having a great fall. My favorite, hands down, time of year is the fall, and hope you're having a good one. We're in this series where we're talking about the kind of stories that we're telling ourselves and the kind of stories that we're writing with our lives. And so far, we've talked about the story of identity, and we've talked about the story of patience, and we've talked about the story of trust. And if you missed any of those weeks, you can check them out online. And today we're going to talk about the story of love. And to get us started, I'd like to take us all to the optician's office and pick out some glasses, some corrective lenses, if you will. Many of you have seen one of these classic eye charts, right? You know what I'm talking about. I remember one time I was going to just get a general physical, and the doctor was a friend of mine, and he said, "Hey, I'll be right back." When he left the office, I'm sitting on that bench thing, with the paper that's rolled out on top of it. I'm sitting on top of that thing, waiting for him to come back in, and I knew I was going to get an eye test, so I memorized the very bottom line of the eye chart. I mean, not even the bottom letters. I like the copyright at the very, very bottom of the fine print at the bottom of the chart. He comes back in and goes, "All right, pick a letter, man, and pick a line, and which one can you read?" And I went, copyright 1952, Milwaukee, Wisconsin. He goes, that's incredible. I go, "No, E. That's all I got, man. I got E," because most of my life I have worn a pair of these. Anybody else nearsighted? Anybody else? Yeah. I've worn a pair of these or contact lenses since I was in the 6th grade. Nearsighted people have a hard time seeing far away. That was my problem, but they can see up close. I had LASIK surgery about 15 years ago now, and 12 seconds on each eye. When I woke up, I could read the clock for the first time, like since the 6th grade. So my myopia has been corrected. However, from time to time, I suffer from a little spiritual myopia. Anybody else? It's when everything in my life is about me. I can see really, really well up close. I can get really self-absorbed, self-centered, very self-focused, because that's how spiritual nearsightedness works. Your life is pretty good, but those in the distance, their needs, their hurts, their desires, their issues, they can just remain foggy. They can stay out of focus, because as long as I can see up close, as long as I can see my life clearly, that's all that really matters. I mean, who needs like a world view anyway? I mean, who needs to talk about global poverty or racial reconciliation and sex trafficking and hurting people? They got their problems, I got mine. And through the years, I've had to ask the Holy Spirit of God to do some LASIK on the eyes of my heart and help me see the way Jesus sees. Anybody farsighted? Got a pair of these somewhere in your house because you can't read up close anymore? Even though these days, because of the LASIK, I can read license plates like a mile away, up close my vision is just getting worse. And I think it has to do more with the age thing than it does with the LASIK thing. I was in a dark restaurant the other night trying to read the menu, had to get the flashlight app out on my phone. So anybody else do that? I had to have my wife pass me the glasses. I mean, it's just pathetic. Now, spiritually speaking, this condition is where we can see like other people's stuff from a distance. I mean, you can dissect and discern their flaws from 100 yards away, but you can't see up close. You can't see your own stuff. I mean, you can see the speck of sawdust in your brother's eye, but you can't see the log sticking out of your own. It's that inability to see right in front of you. And you get to the point where you're no longer introspective. You never ask, "Search me, O God. See if there's anything in me that's out of sync with you, or open the eyes of my heart, Lord." And I'm just telling you, if you refuse to pray that kind of humble prayer, and you refuse to look at your own stuff up close, that condition just gets worse. And you begin to develop blind spots. Blind spots. These are things in you that everybody else can see but you. Maybe a little pride, maybe a little envy, maybe a little insecurity, maybe some irritability. Debbie's car has one of those blind spot monitors on the side mirror that lets you know that something is there that maybe you can't see. And I'm telling you, it comes in really, really super handy in LA traffic. And spiritually speaking, I think we all need a blind spot monitor in our life. We need an honest friend or two that can help us navigate. I got some guys in my life that I've asked to point out to me any blind spots that they see, and man, they have, and they have been invaluable in keeping me from wrecking my life. And I don't really know the medical condition, but this is called astigmatism. I don't know exactly what it is, but I do know it's a distorted perspective. Anybody have astigmatism? And I think a bunch of people in our society actually suffer from spiritual astigmatism, where you're looking at life, you're looking at other people, assigning them worth based upon their size, their shape, their ability, their disability, their beauty, their occupation, the color of their skin, their financial status, their political leanings. It's judging other people based on cultural norms or our own skewed thinking. And when we judge people, we stop seeing them for the priceless masterpiece that God created and loves. You know, Jesus called the religious leaders of his day, the Pharisees, blind guides. Oh, they could see, but not with God's eyes. They had distorted vision. Well, one day, Jesus heals a guy who'd been born blind. This guy just surviving on whatever handouts would come his way. And Jesus stretches out his hand and he heals this guy. And all the religious leaders could see was a violation of their Sabbath laws. They couldn't see the presence of the kingdom of God right there in their very midst. They couldn't see this person of enormous worth and dignity. They couldn't see hope in his newly opened eyes. They couldn't see a reason to celebrate with some poor beggar. They only saw a threat to the religious system that propped up their own sense of spiritual superiority. They looked at the same man that Jesus looked at, but they couldn't see him in the same way that Jesus did. Helen Keller once said, eyes that cannot see, they might be healed, but eyes that will not see cannot be helped. And gang, that's why a self-righteous heart is the most dangerous of all spiritual conditions. And I wear these occasionally. Many of you know I love to do like construction stuff, renovating an old house, and in fact, I actually wore these just a couple of days ago. I was ripping some lumber on a table saw, so I put them on. Now, Debbie says I don't wear them enough, and I probably don't. But honestly, I think I wear them too often. Again, spiritually speaking, it's being able to see okay, but just remaining safe. Kind of afraid to get involved, afraid to be vulnerable, afraid that you might get scammed, you might get used, so you slip these on your heart to protect yourself from the messiness that compassion sometimes brings. I think we need to be wise. I think we need to be discerning. But honestly, at least in my case, sometimes it's just a cover-up for a lack of courageous love. Gang, no one has ever seen like Jesus. He wasn't farsighted, wasn't nearsighted, no astigmatism, no blind spots. He had tremendous peripheral vision, seeing people on the fringes. But even more than that, he saw things in 3D. I totally ripped these off from the last 3D movie I went to. But man, things just come alive when you put these things on, right? And Jesus saw the world that way. He saw the world in 3D because he looked through the eyes of love. And according to God's word, love is a 3D kind of thing. So let me just give you the 3 Ds of love today. You can write these down if you want to. They're very, very simple. The first D is this: love is a decision. Love is a decision. Contrary to popular belief, love is not an involuntary act of the hormones. It's a voluntary act of the will. Now, you know as well as I do, our culture is all about love. Man, bookstore shelves sag under the weight of the volume of romance novels. Hollywood is cranking out love story after love story. And how many love songs are sent out over the airwaves late at night by Delilah? Those for people that are looking for love. You know, love songs like Ed Sheeran's "I'm Dancing in the Dark with You Between My Arms. You look perfect tonight." John's Legend, "All of Me Loves All of You." Katy Perry's Clinger song, "Just because it's over doesn't mean it's really over. And if I think it's over, maybe you'll be coming over again." And one of my all-time favorites, "Ain't no mountain high enough, ain't no valley low enough, ain't no river wide enough to keep me from getting to you." I'm thinking, man, you might need a restraining order on that guy, right? Let me tell you a little bit about my love journey. Some of you have heard me tell this before, but my search for love started in the 5th grade. I had a crush on this girl. Her name was Kathy, and man, I just thought she was the cutest girl ever. And I just had a huge 5th grade crush on this girl. Well, Valentine's Day rolls around, and back then, everybody brought everybody a Valentine's Day card. You kind of bought a sack of them, and you wrote something to everybody in the class. And then we made these sacks, and we cut out like a doily heart and put on the front of the sack, and we taped them to the front of our desk. And then they played these sappy love songs, and everybody got up and took their Valentine's cards and walked around the room and dropped them in everybody's sack on the front of their desk. Well, I take my sack home, and I dump it out on my bed, and guess whose I'm looking for? Yeah, I'm looking for Kathy's, and I find it, and I open it up, and there it was in number 2 lead pencil, I love you, Mike. Oh my goodness. I couldn't believe it. I mean, next day, I chased her around a recess, I punched her in the shoulder, I threw rocks at her, the way 5th grade boys show affection, because I was so much in love with this girl. Well, thankfully, my dating techniques changed by the time I got into high school. And I asked this girl out, and we went to a movie, and I'll never forget it, sitting there in a movie theater, and I wanted to hold her hand so bad, but I was kind of a shy guy. The whole thing with girls was new to me, and I wouldn't have a whole lot of confidence, and I would look over her hand, and I wanted to hold it, but I would go in a countdown mode. I would look over her hand, I go, okay, come on, bro, you can do this. 10, 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, 10, 9. I mean, it would just go on and on and on until I finally got up the courage. But when I did and reached over and grabbed her hand and we interlocked fingers and we rubbed thumbs together, it's like, oh my goodness, I am so in love with this girl. I remember the first time I ever kissed that same girl, it lasted that long, not even that long. I just kissed her on her front porch. I got in my car and I drove home. I was floating all the way home. Sometimes you get home and you can't remember what road you took to get there. That's the way it was that night, man, because I was so much in love. Fast forward about 3 more years, that same girl walked down the aisle of a church with a beautiful white dress on. I'm standing on the platform. The pastor asked us a question. I said, I do. And she said, well, I guess. And we kissed each other. But we walked out of that church down that aisle arm in arm as husband and wife. And I thought, man, this is what love is like. This is love. 3 years later, I watched that same girl go through 36 hours of labor to bring our daughter into the world. And that's when it hit me. Oh, man, I think this is what love is like. You see, love is not a feeling that you fall in and out of. Love is something you choose to do. It's a verb that you choose to do. When I was talking about that blind beggar, Jesus not only saw the blind beggar, he not only saw the outcast leper, the paralyzed, the broken, the left out, the forgotten, the oppressed. Not only did Jesus feel compassion, but he chose to act. He chose to love them, because love is a decision. Jesus warned us one time in Matthew 24, verse 12. He said, because of the increase of wickedness, as time goes on, the love of most will just grow cold. He was saying as time goes on, people will become more and more myopic. Because unless you and I intentionally focus our lives outwardly, we will become more and more self-centered, more self-focused. It's just where that old sin nature gravitates. With all that's going on in the world, man, I got to look out for number one. May that verse never be true of us. When evil and the consequences associated bring pain and suffering into a family, into a city, into a nation, into a neighborhood, into a country, into a global community, the people of God step up and choose to love even more fervently and selflessly. The early Christians were known for that. The most common thing said about the early Jesus followers was, these people love everybody. Y'all may have seen this before, but a 2nd century historian named Aristides sent this investigative report back to the Roman emperor about those known as the Jesus followers. Look what he said. He said, they do not keep for themselves the goods entrusted to them. They do not covet what belongs to others. They show love to their neighbors. They do not do to another what they would not have done to themselves. They speak gently to those who oppress them, and in this way they make them their friends. It has become their passion to do good to their enemies. They live in the awareness of their smallness. Every one of them who has anything gives ungrudgingly to the one who has nothing. If they see a traveling stranger, they bring him in under their roof. They rejoice over him as over a real brother. For they do not call one another brothers after the flesh, but they know that they are brothers in God. If they hear of one of them that is imprisoned or oppressed for the sake of Christ, they take care of all of his needs. If anyone among them is poor or comes into want, while they themselves have nothing to spare, they will fast 2 or 3 days for him. In this way, they can supply any poor man with the food that he needs. This, O Emperor, is the rule of life of the Christians, and this is their manner of life. And gang, these people didn't even have a Bible yet. All they had to go on was what Jesus said, the one who came back from the dead, when he said, "A new commandment I give you, love others as I have loved you." The early Christians internalized what Paul said in Galatians chapter 5. The only thing that counts is faith expressing itself through love. You know, a lot of us set personal goals, and to reach them, man, we got to get really intentional about them, right? We're going to eat right, going to exercise, going to read more, going to get better grades this semester, going to spend more time with the family, going to learn something new, going to quit smoking, going to quit drinking, got to get organized, got to get out of debt, we're going to take a vacation this year, going to enjoy life more. Those are good goals, worthy goals, noble goals, but check this out. Let love be your highest goal. With the same kind of careful thought and intentionality, let love be your highest goal. Work harder at that than anything else. Whatever choices you make throughout the day, start by asking, what would love have me do today? And get really intentional about it. And then look for opportunities to do love, because love is a decision. And secondly, love is a demonstration. Love is a demonstration. That's the second D. Romans 12 verse 9 says, don't just pretend to love others. Really love them. I think whenever I read that verse, in fact, I've got it written out in the margin of my Bible right next to that verse. When my son Derek was in the 4th grade, I got to go to school. I went to school to eat lunch with him. And when I got there, I looked over at the table, and there was Derek and a girl sitting there by themselves. And I'm thinking, way to go, Derek. Took me to 5th grade to move in. But in 4th grade, way to go, dude. Well, Debbie was working as a teacher's aide at the time, and I walked over to her and I said, what's up with Derek and this girl? Because I noticed the other table was just jam-packed full of kids. And she goes, that's the girl everybody in his class makes fun of. They say she's not very smart, she doesn't have very nice clothes, and she doesn't smell very good, and kind of poor, and Derek's the only one that'll eat lunch with her. And I just got all choked up, and I didn't go over there and eat with him. I just thought, I'm just going to meet him when he gets home. So I did. I waited for him to get off the school bus, and he gets off the bus. I can remember this like it was yesterday. And walking down the street, I just put my arm around him and said, dude, I stopped by school today, and I saw you eating lunch with that girl. Buddy, I just got to tell you, man, I'm so proud of you. Why'd you do that? And he looked at me with that innocent 4th grade look. And he said, well, Dad, didn't you say in your sermon, we're supposed to love everybody? I said, yeah, I said that. I didn't think anybody do it, but yeah, I said that. He just figured it out. Don't just pretend to love others. Like, really love them. The Greek word for compassion is the word spalachna. Why don't you say that with me? Spalachna. You have to say it from like way down in here. Spalachna. I'll say it again. Spalachna. It sounds like you had some bad Taco Bell, right? And you just spalachna all over the place. But that's where the word comes from. It's that stirring in your gut. It's that pit in your stomach that moves you to compassionate action. It moves from your eyes to your heart to your gut to your mind to your hands to your feet to your wallet. You say, you know what? I just got to do something. And Jesus tells a famous story commonly known as the parable of the Good Samaritan. It's about a guy who had spalachna. There was this dude that was beaten up, and he was robbed, and he's left for dead by the side of the road on the way to Jericho. And religious folks passed by, but this guy, he stopped and he felt spalachna. And he stopped and he helped the victim. He got emotionally, physically, even financially involved with this guy. He did something. So Jesus asked a young lawyer in the crowd after he tells this story, he says, which of these three do you think was a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of the robbers? Well, the expert in the law replied, the one who had mercy, splachna, on him. And Jesus told him, go and do likewise. Like many of you, I've been praying for the people of Haiti. They've had a really tough year, tough life there. We spent some time in Haiti through the years. I have a deep affection for those folks. And I remember a few years back, I took a group of business guys and some student athletes together to Haiti, and we were laying block on an orphanage. And man, when guys are, mixing concrete and you're sweating and playing with kids, it was so cool to watch these guys just come alive. And lots of little kids were having a dentist treat their teeth for the very first time, so there was a whole lot of fear and a lot of anxiety going on about the pain they might experience. And there was this young guy named Brian, who sat down next to one little girl who was crying. He put his arm around her and pulled her up on his lap and just held her on his lap. And before long, he said he started to cry too. He said, I looked down at her little green dress and I noticed all these tear stains. And I couldn't tell whether they were hers or whether they were mine. And I listened to some folks like you who sponsor kids through maybe Compassion International or World Vision. You talk about them like they're your very own kids. I watch men and women like many of you who sponsor a fellow struggler in AA or NA, how you love them with this humble, patient, unconditional love, the same way God has loved you. I see foster families opening up their homes to embrace families in crisis. I see students like standing up and including those who have been bullied or made fun of, and I think to myself, man, they're learning how to see like Jesus sees. Whatever you choose to do, get out into the community and put yourself in a position where you can see the needs, where you can observe injustice and you can feel people's pain. Create some space for the Holy Spirit to move in your heart. And not everybody can travel great distances, but you can take the first step. You can work in a food pantry. You can take a pet to a nursing home. You can swing a hammer on a habitat house. You can donate generously, cross socioeconomic lines. You may be going to India, or you may be going across the cul-de-sac to serve a neighbor. It just means getting up and doing something, because the only thing that counts is faith expressing itself through love. The Bible's pretty clear about this, about our responsibility, to how love is a demonstration. It says in Psalm 82, defend the cause of the weak, defend the cause of the fatherless, maintain the rights of the poor and oppressed, rescue the weak and the needy, deliver them from the hand of the wicked. Jesus' brother James writes this, he says, pure and genuine religion in the sight of God the Father means caring for orphans and widows in their distress and refusing to let the world corrupt you. God himself says this in Isaiah chapter 58. I love this. He says, share your food with the hungry and give shelter to the homeless. Give clothes to those who need them, and do not hide from relatives who need your help. He says, you do that, then your salvation will come like the dawn, and your wounds will quickly heal. Your godliness will lead you forward, and the glory of the Lord will protect you from behind. I love that then. He's just saying there's healing for ourselves. When we're not thinking of ourselves so much, when you get your eyes off yourself and you start to see with 3D, then your own salvation, then your own healing, then your light breaks through. Jesus' best friend John writes to a bunch of brand new Jesus followers, and he tenderly refers to them as little children. He says, little children, we love because he first loved us. If anyone says, I love God, yet hates his brother, well, he's a liar. For anyone who does not love his brother whom he has seen cannot love God whom he has not seen. And he's given us this commandment. Whoever loves God must also love his brother. The kitchen smells like supper and the table's ready waiting. And someone says they thought we ought to pray before we ate, and would I thank the Lord for all he has so bountifully bestowed. But please don't pray too long, because the meat is getting cold. On the other side of town, a mother sets another table for herself and several children, just as well as she is able, but there's not too much because last night's man, he didn't pay so well. Will there be enough for breakfast? That's really hard to tell. Am I passing by the man beside the road to Jericho? Have I cruelly snubbed the woman there as to the well I go? Am I my brother's keeper? Cup of water, did you say? Is the second mile outside my door? or somewhere down the way? Well, the news is over now. There's football on another station when at the door appears my aunt and half of our relation, and we all remark how nice to have the family here this way. It's our love that binds us oh so close. We'd love to always stay. While in a dark and dingy room, a young girl eyes the walls around her, and she wonders if one soul would care if in 3 weeks they found her. All her life she's been rejected, never had an honest friend. Is it life or mere existence? Who would care if it should end? Am I passing by the man beside the road to Jericho? Have I cruelly snubbed the woman there? As to the well I go. Am I my brother's keeper? Cup of water, did you say, is a second mile outside my door? Or somewhere down the way? The family's gone. It's quiet. And the bed is soft beneath me, but instead of sleeping dreams, my restless thoughts creep up to meet me. And somewhere in the distance I hear hungry children cry. And a girl unloved, uncared for, brings a tear into my eye. Well, if people saw me weeping, they'd think that I was mad. Well, I tell them it's a nightmare, or the dream I dreamed was bad. I must gain my self-control. Tomorrow's Sunday school. And so, bloodshot eyes on a Sunday morning. Folks might talk a lot, you know. If a man loves not his brother, he is able now to see that he makes himself a liar when he says that he loves me. Little children, it's not thoughts or words that prove your love to all. If your love is not in action, then it isn't love at all. Because love is a decision, and love is a demonstration. One more D, and love is always, always the difference. If you've ever been to a wedding, you've probably heard the passage from 1 Corinthians 13. If I speak with the tongues of men and of angels, but I have not love. If I give all my money to the poor, but I don't have love. Even if I become a martyr for the faith and I don't have love, well, my life is just a clanging gong or a clashing cymbal. It's just obnoxious noise before God, because genuine love is always the difference. It has to be the motivation. It's a state of mind and heart. It's authentic motivation. It's a different way to see the world. It's 3D love. And that's what makes the difference. I keep this word from Brennan Manning in the margin of my Bible and in my heart and head. He just says, if we want to truly love, we must return again and again to the love of the great lover. Because when you know that you are loved unconditionally, it starts to flow out of you. When you know the love of the great lover, it changes the way you see the world. That's why a guy named Paul prayed this prayer. It's over in Ephesians chapter 3. We've seen it many times here at Real Life. He just says, I just pray that you, being rooted and established in love, may have power, together with all the Lord's holy people, to grasp how high, how wide, how long, how deep is the love of Christ, and to know this love that surpasses knowledge, that you may be filled to the measure of all the fullness of God. I did a little word study on that word that's translated grasp right there. It comes from the root word that means to rust, decay, or eat all the way through. So you see what he's saying here? I don't want you just to learn some stuff about God's love. I want you to experience it. I want you to let it eat all the way through you. Tell yourself the story of God's love for you. Let His love be your security. Let His love be your hope. Let His love fill you with gratitude and peace and compassion. Then you will overflow on other people, and your story will be the story of love. So what are we called to do? To see what Jesus would see if He were looking through our eyes, and respond as He would respond. It's always been about the heart. A heart that beats after the same thing that God's heart beats after. It's about compassion. It's about splachna. It's about seeing Jesus in the least of these. It's seeing people with a 3D difference-making love. I've had this quote tacked up on my office wall, back when I had an office. It's from Ian Watson. It says, we live on a contaminated planet. It is contaminated on every level. It should have been quarantined from heaven. No reasonable God would go near it with a 10-foot pole. But Jesus is no reasonable God. He became a human being and took on your uncleanness and mine. But instead of the world infecting Him, He infected the world. With his immaculate infection, it's still spreading. So what do you say we keep the infection spreading? Let's take off our blinders and let our story be the story of love. Let's refuse to check out of this broken world. Let's refuse to allow the needs of other people in the distance stay foggy. Let's refuse to go into isolation. Let's keep taking risks that love requires. Let's open our hearts. Let's open our homes. Let's get up close. And let's see like Jesus sees. Why don't you pray with me? Father, so grateful for your love for us. And it's my deepest prayer today that all of us would experience the great love of the great lover, so that that kind of love could flow out of us. God, we acknowledge to you, we all have vision problems. Spiritually speaking, sometimes we're nearsighted, or we don't really care about people in the distance. Sometimes we're farsighted, where we can't see our own stuff or up close stuff. Sometimes we have a distorted perspective, kind of an astigmatism kind of approach. Sometimes we slip on the safety glasses. Sometimes we have a blind spot. But God, we want to learn how to look at the world through the lenses of love, the way Jesus did. And to let our love just be the difference-making story in our life. So God, I pray that today that we would grasp, let it eat all the way through how much we are loved by you, and then in return, this week we would go love like you. And I pray all this in Jesus' name. Amen.